Yeah. Hi. Hey, Lauren.
Welcome to 52 Weeks of Hope. This is where you get to hear how to feel happy, balanced, and worthwhile, and how to make that lonely ache vanish. Feel empowered, confident, and secure. I am Lauren Abrams, and we have Jennifer Berman, Dr. Jennifer Berman, with us today. And hopefully, you got to hear her episode, which is on right now. And I started that episode. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Go ahead and speak. I just want to make sure we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Hi, hi. 1, 2, 3. I feel like I look too dark. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Talk?
Hello. I'm talking. They can't hear me.
No, not yet.
Hold on.
So Dr. Jennifer Berman has overcome a lot of challenges on her own. And for anyone who doesn't know, she's a female sexual health medicine specialist. And if you're feeling sluggish, unsure which way to turn, even if you're an empty nester, Dr. Berman can definitely relate. She's a former co-host of The Doctors. She has a thriving Beverly Hills practice, and she definitely understands where you're at. She's been through plenty in her life. She's incredibly healthy and spiritually fit, and she's going to tell us how she maintains and also how you can be an advocate for your sexual health. And also, if you're an empty nester, how you can reinvent yourself if that's where you're at. So, is your mic working?
Can you hear me now?
See if I can hear you yet.
Hear me? Yes.
It's going. If you're enjoying the podcast, please tell 2 of your friends and give us a positive review. Get on the email.
Can you hear me? I'm talking.
I got it.
You got it? You can hear? Yes?
Yeah, got it. So I wanted to start there. The episode starts with when I was asking you about when you're on Conan, and you're talking about the crystal shock pods and so on, which I find it so fascinating because a lot of people go, "Oh, medical doctor, how could they talk about spiritual things?" But I actually was going to ask you, is that something that women in perimenopause or menopause, is that something that or any woman should be doing for sexual health? The items that you bring when you're on these shows are those things that women are supposed to be using.
Well, those, again, that was television, and they were looking for tittillating, entertainment. But that said, what you're referring to, they were called chalk rugs. CHAK Rugs was a company, and those were special crystal, phallic-shaped crystals that were with the intention that they should be inserted vaginally to improve pelvic floor, not only pelvic floor strength and tone, but also from the spiritual healing properties of crystals. There was an amethyst one, there was a clear quartz ones, and I'm not a crystal healer by any stretch and don't claim to be, but I do believe in energy. And I do believe that crystals emit energy. And I do believe that you can set intentions with crystals. And many people do, not inserting them vaginally. But that's the premise of those. But in the context of pelvic floor strength and tone, that's a really important factor in terms of sexual health, urinary tract health, and so forth. And that, on that episode, that was just a different spin on the pelvic floor. Therapies.
Yeah. And do people question you about the fact that the incongruence to some people of being a medical doctor and your spiritual beliefs? How did you have any problem with that?
The more problem that I have, frankly, is being a medical doctor and a sexual health expert. People are more provoked by that and make assumptions by that and assume that I'm like this almost like a sex surrogate, or that I'm like a sexual pro or whatever. They automatically make assumptions about my own values and sexuality just based on that. In terms of the spiritual side, I don't really in traditional medical forums, I'm sure you're aware of this, these topics don't really come up in traditional Eastern, medical practices, other than the health benefits of meditation. Will you put that on plus? We do acknowledge that and talk about that, but from the standpoint of a marriage or a interconnection between medicine and faith, or health and hope and faith, that the traditional medical community really doesn't address that. So where that comes up is just on one-on-one with patients, that I share my experience, strength, and hope. And now here I am doing it publicly on your forum, so your listeners and hopefully others will begin to understand that there is a relationship between health and well-being and your spiritual health and well-being, and that they're not separate and shouldn't be separate or not connected.
Has anybody said anything to you? And why don't you talk about what your spiritual practices are and how they came to be?
So I'll have to say it's been my spiritual growth has been, I'm in my 50s now, and it's still a work in progress. And I grew up in a home that was, we'll say, spiritual, but not religious on my mother's side, and really nothing on my father's side. So I didn't really have any leadership direction. Nothing was forced down my throat, spiritually or religion-wise. And I was technically Jewish. That's what I was told. But there was no organized religion or activities in my home. So in terms of developing an understanding of God or whatever, that it wasn't even on my radar, by the way. It wasn't something that I thought was important. I knew that other people did, but it wasn't something that I really worried about or thought about until there were really no other options to solve the problems and situations and challenges that I was facing. When you run out of your own options and all your choices and solutions aren't working anymore, if you are still wanting to be alive and continue, and you hit brick walls. Otherwise, it got to a point where I didn't have a choice but to consider, other options, and spiritual options. Belief in a higher power was, that, or continue to die, basically, and be miserable. So out of desperation, I guess, is where I first opened up to the idea of it. And then over time, not in crisis, it's become more refined and more intuitive and more individualized. I think now at this point in my career, as a practitioner, medical practitioner, the person is, having been involved in lots of spiritual conversations and discussions, I think, what we say, the God of our understanding, that what I believe is in mine, it's really all the same. We have our own understanding of it, and we call it this and we call it that. And some people say it's nature, some people say it's the ocean, some people think it's Jesus or the man in the sky or whatever it is. It's all, in my opinion, all the same thing, but we just experience it individually. And we have our own feeling and beliefs and relationship with that source that we call the God of our understanding. But in my opinion, we all share the same one.
Yeah. And I like that you use that, and you talked about it in the episode, how you use your own intuitive sense, sixth sense, inner knowing, whatever you called it, your intuitive knowing, I believe, in the episode, with your patients, that you get this sense and this feeling. And
sometimes I'll channel. Sometimes I'll say, when they start, I can tell when it's going to go down, the path of, trauma and abuse or things like that. And I can also tell if the person is very stoic and resistant and not open. Some people have done work already when they come in with these, others have not. And I sometimes channel, ask, help me with the words, what to say, because I've learned also over the years that you have to be careful, because it can be offensive. Like, people come in I'm a doctor, and they're paying to see a doctor, not, a spiritual guru or anything else. So if I go too far in that direction, in some people, it can, they shut off and, give me the prescriptions, when can you do the surgery? But what about all the side effects? They can't wrap their heads around it initially. So I've learned, and then there are even some that can be offended by it. So the sixth sense and the intuitive kind of sense, I've refined. I won't say, I don't know what the triggers or red flags are. I can't think of them off the top of my head of who I can speak to. I pretty much do it to everybody, but start sort of very basic and very general, and then, can hone in and become more specific with more of my own ideas and thoughts, with more of my own recommendations and tools, depending on how receptive the person is.
No, I understand. I have the same thing in my law practice where I get this feeling and I want to talk just as a human. And some people do not want to hear it. Just like, give me the law, tell me my rights. and yeah, they just, anyway, I totally get that. So I know a lot of people want to know, how do you look so good? How are you so fit? I mean, your kids have left. We talked about this too, that the whole empty nest and reinventing yourself and getting so interested in other things and somebody listening go, yeah, that's great for you. You guys, you're a doctor or a lawyer, this, that, but what about me? But it's not even about our professions. And what would you tell somebody who's listening that they're empty nest, or, there's so many people, menopausal, perimenopausal, and it does intersect in my belief. So do you want to address those?
Yeah, well, for sure. It's hard to be, looking and feeling great and creative and all that stuff when you're not feeling well and you're going through menopause. So hormone balance is something that is far too overlooked. Not only in the medical community and medical professions, but by patients, by all of us as well. It's still considered a quasi-taboo subject. It's something that we don't really want to talk about and just sort of keep, about. And that is a problem, because when you're asking me how am I looking well and feeling well and doing all these things, I am doing them, but I'm also, as far as I'm concerned, optimized hormonally. And I have been taking bioidentical hormones since
what is that?
Mid to late 30s, early 40s. So hormone replacement therapy.
Okay.
When you're in your perimenopause, late 30s, early 40s, that's when I first started experiencing symptoms, and I was on the cutting edge. I was on the front lines of developing a new and evolving field of sexual medicine, sexual health, of which hormone balance is a critical part. So I was, taking bioidentical hormones in my mid to late 30s, which is when I started experiencing seriously profound moodiness, irritability, short fuse, couldn't sleep, low energy. So mood, energy, sleep, weight. I felt like I was gaining weight. I couldn't lose weight after my second baby. And so that's when I first started.
What are they in like layperson's terms? What are those called?
What are hormones? So hormones are
replacements. Like, what would we have heard of? And
well, that your ovary, what you need to get pregnant. You need eggs, and your ovaries make eggs. And there are hormones that your body makes to generate eggs. The whole point is, during our reproductive health, is just we're not making more, but ovulating the eggs that we have. We're born with a certain number of eggs, and then we ovulate them, and our cycle is governed by hormones, right? That's what keeps us reproductive. So those same hormones that keep us reproductive and cycling and healthy and feeling, remote, who we are and what we are, and feeling our best selves, those same hormones start to decline when we get older. So with perimenopause is in your mid to late 30s, early 40s to 50s, and gradually ovarian function, the hormones that your ovaries make, begin to peter out. And when they start to peter out, that's when when they start to peter out, or when they start to fluctuate up and down, is when we start to feel not like ourselves in terms of mood, memory, sleep, weight gain, body aches and pains, energy, cognitive function, not just short-term memory, but the ability to learn new things, the ability to absorb new information and then relate that information to somebody else, and and sexual health and sexual function, lubrication, sensation, arousal, orgasm. All of those things are directly related to hormone balance, and they're the hormones that your ovaries make, your adrenal glands make some hormones, and your thyroid also makes hormones. And all of them are interrelated, and all of them fluctuate and decline with age.
Yeah. So thank you. So I just wondered which hormones you took when you were in your late 30s, early 40s, and are they the same that you're taking now?
They're always the same, and there's not that many of them. So there's estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and thyroid hormone. So your ovaries make estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Your thyroid makes thyroid hormones. Your adrenal gland also makes hormones. But the main ones related to menopause that we're talking about replacing are those: estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, which is an important hormone in women as well as men, and then thyroid hormone.
Okay. Okay, so keep going. And so you've been taking some form of replacement?
Yeah, so when you're younger, not just me, but anyone, when we're in our mid to late 30s, not fully in menopause. So menopause happens when you have not had a period, defined by no period for 1 year. So if you're 8 months, 6 months, you're not menopausal, you're perimenopausal. So when you have absence of menses for a year, you're technically menopausal. And that's when you begin hormone replacement therapy. Now, before that, and this is what's innovative and new and that not many doctors do, but before menopause, we'll say the perimenopause. So you're still having a cycle. Maybe it's irregular. Maybe it's every 3 months, 6 months, every other, whatever it is. We still prescribe hormones, and it's not necessarily the same amount as somebody that's menopausal, but still to balance hormones and also to alleviate symptoms. So in my 30s, late 30s and early 40s, I still had ovarian function. So I was taking really low doses of estrogen. I was having to compound estrogen, and I didn't need to take progesterone all the time. So we had to compound prescriptions for lower doses. And as I got older, started experiencing more symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, those came next. Then I needed higher doses of estrogen and progesterone.
So when you take these, how did these help you?
They help you. What the biggest, I'm so far removed from it now because since my 30s, so it's hard for me to remember, except when when my hormones start to decline, the first thing that comes up is I start to get migraines, which I had before, migraines and mood. Those two things, and also libido, I would say sexual. So libido, energy, mood, and sleep, everything, all those things. And if I start to, wane a little bit, those symptoms start to creep back up. So how, no, and again, I've been on them so long, it baffles me that women can go about life feeling like I do even for a minute. Like if one day, oh my God, I forgot to put on my pad, or I'm late to get my pill, I can't sustain in that discomfort anymore for a day, much less weeks and months. And there are so many women that are walking around out there, not sleeping, riddled with anxiety and depression and irritability, extremely unhappy with their weight and struggling to lose weight and can't lose weight, and completely lacking interest and desire whatsoever to sex with their husbands. And they go months, years being told, this is what happens, or you have fibromyalgia, or this is because COVID stress, or any number of things. And it's shocking to me how many women, walk around like that. And
so how can they be their own best advocate for anybody who's listening?
I think listening is the first step, and this is why I'm so happy. Be it listening to a podcast, looking on social media, getting, even now you can get online, and that's what's happening. The women are starting to like wake up and say, "Wait a minute." And it's sort of like my story with the spirituality, having to be miserable enough, hit the wall, and desperate enough to seek other answers. And they're going to their gynecologists and they're going to their doctors and they're being placated and told, every now and then, given a little vitamin or a cream or this, but no real holistic, comprehensive, defined solution. And I think you have to be your own best advocate. You have to recognize the symptoms. Don't dismiss them. It's very easy to say, I can't sleep because, my mom just died and I'm having sex, or my husband lost his job, so that's why we're not having sex. We can blame it on a lot of different things. And a lot of different things can cause those symptoms, and it can be situational. But we know deep down inside that we do not feel like ourselves. And that's probably the recurring like mantra that I hear. I don't feel like myself. I don't feel like myself. I'm not myself. I'm not myself. And that nobody's listening to me. And I've been to all these different doctors and I've tried all these different things. And I'm so frustrated. And many of them will say, but what about that? And what about that? And I said, stop, listen to me. And that's when the change begins. When they listen, they're a seed of hope. There's a little seed. Okay, maybe this lady knows what she's talking about. I don't have anything else to lose, by believing that this is going to work. So, so even just that, some women are like that. Some women come and help me, do whatever you want. Others are resistant, are skeptical. They've spent a lot of money and seen a lot of other people and tried a lot of different things. And they're like, okay, whatever you say. But eventually, if they buy into the program, which today, based on my spiritual fitness and my practice, and I'm a living testament, I'm 57 and walking around like this, they most all, I can't think of any off the top of my head that don't, buy the story, drink the Kool-Aid, let's say, not really, but in part, part of it is mental. And I said that on the first segment.
That was really interesting.
The person themselves has a responsibility. 60% or more is them and what's in their head, responsible for the outcome and the success of the treatments and the transformation from, discomfort and dis-ease to well-being. And they recognize that, and we're hopefully making a difference.
Yeah. I just think that's so great. Just real quick, and for somebody who does want to reinvent themselves, here they are, they're an empty nester and they're ready to just say, okay, I'm sick of feeling like this. I'm ready to reinvent myself. I'm going to take charge of my health. What's one last word of advice you would give?
Well, taking charge of your health, having your hormones levels checked, finding a healthcare provider that can be your champion, and then getting in the right mindset I've learned over the years that it's a skill set, a muscle you have to build. I think we call it, what do we say? Putting it aside, or were you not supposed to think about, what is that term? My menopause brain is, Lauren, where
letting it go and turn it over and
turning it over, let it go. Back in the day, I used to think that was just like turning a blind eye, pretending like it doesn't happen. But there is, I think, scientific evidence now that reshifting your focus to a different thought, whatever it is, changes your brain chemistry, which then changes your mood, which then changes your energy, which then changes the moments that are unfolding around you and the people that are attracted to you. So it starts and stops again with the thoughts that are in your head. And it's easier said than done, like, okay, just shift out of a negative thought. But the more you do it and the more you practice it, the more you can. And so it's important to think about what you want, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, or somebody that's been staying at home with their kids and raising kids and now want something to do, is as long as we're thinking and creating, we're alive. And it doesn't matter what it is, if it's knitting, if it's scrapbooking. I saw my husband's 80-year-old dad has a lady friend who's somewhat younger, but not much. And she got inspired by, it's called Elder Statesman. It's a really fancy cashmere brand. They're like $1,000 or more for these little sweaters, and they're very colorful, and they're super soft. And so she took it upon herself. She came with me to a store in the palette called Elise Walker that has all those brands, and they're thousands of dollars. And she's like, I think I can make one of those. And she took a picture of it. Like 2 months later, she came back and she was wearing one of the sweaters. And I said, oh my God, you got it. Where'd you? And she said, I made it. And from making that, the ladies in the knitting store led to the ladies in this other store. She's now making these sweaters for everybody and their brother and having a ball, and, has a purpose. So the point of that story is it doesn't matter what it is that inspires you or what it is that you enjoy, but it has to be something.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And whatever we focus on grows. So focus on the good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that is so great. Thank you so much for coming back on. Anyone who hasn't listened, Dr. Jennifer Berman's episode is on now. And we have the show notes on the website. So thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thank you, Lauren.